The likeness of the heart is that of a feather in an empty plot of land, being blown over and over by the wind. Imagine that imagery for a second. It's a striking, highly poetic quote from the Prophet Muhammad. And, it perfectly captures the absolute fragility of human spirituality. That fragility is exactly what we're going to be exploring today.
The Arabic word for heart is qalb. It actually comes from the root word taqallub, which literally translates to constant alteration, variation, and ups and downs. The source material points out that the human heart changes even faster than a pot of rapidly boiling water. This brilliantly reframes things for us. It shows that having weak faith isn't necessarily some catastrophic personal failure, it's a natural human condition. Since the heart is quite literally designed to turn and fluctuate, weak faith is an expected spiritual ailment, but crucially, it's one that requires a proper clinical diagnosis.
Welcome to today's Explainer. We're taking a really fascinating look at a deeply spiritual text to understand the complete framework for treating weak faith. We're going to approach this whole topic just like a medical ailment. It's something that we can diagnose, understand, and ultimately, absolutely cure through practical, actionable steps.
Okay, here is our roadmap for today's spiritual checkup. First, we'll look at the symptoms of weak faith, then the root causes of the disease. Next, the fluctuation of faith, and finally, comprehensive spiritual remedies.
Let's jump right into Section 1, Symptoms of Weak Faith.
As we run through these extremely practical symptoms, I want you to kind of mentally check your own pulse here. The source describes a diseased heart as feeling hard and rough, literally almost like a stone. So what does that look like? Well, you might feel a distinct laziness, just going through empty, thoughtless motions in your worship, purely out of a boring habit. Maybe you feel a physical tightness in your chest, or you're getting hit with sudden mood swings and a weird intolerance toward others. Another huge symptom is feeling completely unmoved by the Quran or by reminders of mortality. And a major red flag? Not feeling any anger at all when moral limits are violated, combined with this sudden, intense desire for fame, leadership, and prominence. It's basically a profound spiritual numbness.
This next part brilliantly illustrates the difference between a healthy spiritual heart and a diseased or hypocritical one. How do they view the exact same sin? A believer sees their sin as if they're sitting beneath a massive towering mountain, absolutely terrified it's going to collapse and crush them. But the hypocrite? They see that exact same sin like a pesky fly buzzing past their nose, just easily shoot away with a casual wave of the hand. It's amazing how the perception of consequence completely shifts when faith gets weak.
Here's another subtle but absolutely critical symptom: discarding small good deeds. The text gives some great everyday examples, like simply moving a harmful branch or a rock out of the road, or even just speaking to a friend with a cheerful, smiling expression. It even mentions something as basic as emptying your bucket to give someone a drink of water. If you find yourself thinking, that's too small, it doesn't matter, the text diagnoses that exact mindset as a major symptom of spiritual lethargy.
All right, moving on to Section 2, Root Causes of the Disease. So, what are the actual environmental and internal toxins causing this weakened state? Well, a prolonged absence from a faith-filled environment or isolating yourself from righteous peers creates a massive vulnerability. Think about it. If you're living in an environment saturated with sin, or if your workplace chatter is literally only about money and promotions, your heart is going to quickly adapt to the darkness of those surroundings. Internally, a heavy preoccupation with worldly wealth and kids, or just banking on a long life while completely forgetting the hereafter, it acts like a slow-moving toxin that just hardens the heart over time.
There's an incredibly powerful warning here that hits the nail on the head. 2 hungry wolves sent against the sheep do not do more damage to them than a man's eagerness for wealth and standing does to his religion. Wow. The source warns that becoming a slave of the dinar brings absolute spiritual ruin. Worldly attachment isn't just a minor distraction, folks. It is literally a predator hunting down your faith.
Which brings us to Section 3, the fluctuation of faith. The text states this beautifully. Faith wears out in the heart, just as clothes wear out. It's never static, right? It naturally waxes and wanes depending on our actions. But there's a second metaphor here that I just love. It says weak faith is like a dark cloud temporarily covering a shining moon. This offers us so much hope. The inner light of that moon, your faith, is still there. It hasn't vanished. It hasn't been permanently extinguished. It just needs the dark clouds of sin and neglect to be swept away so it can shine brilliantly all over again.
And that leads perfectly into Section 4, Comprehensive Spiritual Remedies.
Time to write the prescription.
Here is our step-by-step treatment plan. Step 1. Ponder the meanings of the Quran. Don't just read it out of habit, deeply reflect on it. Step 2. Actively try to feel the awe of Allah's might by learning His names and attributes. Step 3. Increase dhikr, which is that continuous daily remembrance of God. And step 4. Remember death in a very practical way by visiting graveyards to ground your perspective. These aren't just abstract ideas. They are highly actionable, clinical treatments designed specifically for a hardened heart.
Let's look a little closer at that specific cure of dhikr, or remembrance. The source explains that just as forgetfulness is the core disease, constant remembrance is the medicine, and it softens the hardness of the heart, just as copper melts in a blazing fire. It is an active, continuous melting away of that hardened, stony exterior we were talking about earlier.
Now, to avoid spiritual burnout, you absolutely need variety in your spiritual medicine. Different acts of worship actually map to specific gates of paradise. For example, prayer leads to the gate of prayer, fasting goes to the gate of al-Rayyan, charity to the gate of charity, and jihad to the gate of jihad. Why does this matter for us? Because engaging in a wide variety of worship keeps your routine fresh. It gives you access to the different gates without getting completely fatigued by doing just one single thing over and over again.
We can actually see this variety in action by tracking a single day in the life of Abu Bakr, a close companion of the Prophet. Just look at this timeline. In the morning, he woke up fasting. By midday, he attended a funeral. In the afternoon, he fed a needy person. And by the evening, he visited a sick person. Talk about a stacked schedule. He varied his good deeds continuously, providing us with a perfect historical model for applying the exact cures we just talked about.
Let's pause on that midday activity for a second, attending a funeral. The source highlights a fascinating metric here. You actually earn 2 qirats of reward for attending a funeral until the burial. But what exactly is a qirat? Well, the text describes each one as being the size of a great mountain. So, not only does going to a funeral serve as a super potent reminder of our own mortality, which we know is a primary cure for a hard heart, but it literally yields mountain-sized spiritual rewards. Incredible!
So, wrapping all of this up, it really comes down to rigorous self-evaluation. The source text leaves us with this incredibly provocative question. What have you sent forward for the morrow? It's asking you to take stock of your spiritual health checkup today. Are you storing up those mountain-sized rewards? Are you actively clearing the dark clouds away from your shining moon? I'm going to leave you to deeply reflect on that. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep learning.